size chance. That the dates that we signed up for speeches are all going to get pushed back one day. So if you signed up for Monday, there's a fair chance you'll be going Tuesday. I will know by tomorrow. By tomorrow, I will know for sure if we're bumping everything back a day. The main thing that is going to change will be all the kids that signed up for Friday. They'll get the whole additional weekend to prep because they wouldn't be going until Monday. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. The good side of it is 2 extra days to prep. Hello, right? The bad thing is, while everybody else is done and enjoying their weekend, you're still prepping. So, huh? Well, I'm talking about the kids that go on Friday.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and jump right into what we are working on today. We're still in Analyze. And the second thing that I want you to jot down as you're thinking about and planning your speech is to be really intentional in engaging your audience and really intentional in not offending your audience. Okay? So we have a couple of topics that I think could create some emotion. Okay? And your goal is not to just get up and speak your mind. Your goal is to engage and pull your audience in so that your voice is heard and considered. Some people, when they get up and give a speech, they get way too self-centered and they think it's just about saying the things they want to say because they've got the floor and it's their time. But if you are a person who wants to be used as an instrument of change, then you want the audience to be your friend. You want to pull them in. You want them to hear what you have to say. You don't want to alienate them, okay? And then engaging your audience. Think of ways that you can get the audience to actually participate. If all they're doing is sitting and listening, it's going to be much harder for them to stay engaged. How many of you have been stuck in a situation where whoever's doing the talking, they just drone on and on and on, and even when you really want to pay attention, you find yourself not. So you want to do things that get your audience involved. So you might do something like this, okay? For example, all right, you are my audience. Everyone listen. I'm going to pose a question. And if the question applies to you, I'd like you to stand to your feet. Have you ever been set up to talk to small group, medium-sized group, or large group, and you actually had a physical body reaction? Like you're gonna stand if any of these apply to you. You began to sweat profusely. You felt like you didn't have very much air. Strangely, you couldn't breathe quite right. You felt completely blank. Your mind went blank. There was nothing left. You knew you had to say something, but you couldn't think of what to say. You had shakes. Your body was, you didn't even maybe feel nervous, but your body was like shaking. You didn't sleep the night before because it was just on your mind like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this. The minute you got up, you got the giggles and you couldn't stop like laughing or say like something. You have a speech pattern or a tic that's repetitive and you got nervous. It would happen like saying like or Have a seat. So I just named some things that happen to a lot of people when they have to do public speaking. And did you notice I made you get up and move? Why? Because I know my audience. This is something else. This audience is coming in from lunch. The weather's warming up. You're going to be hot because this room heats up sometimes. You've just eaten, so you are likely going to be kind of like weirdly drowsy but wired at the same time. This is not an easy time frame in the day to speak to a group of people. So think of things that you can do to get them involved, okay? So let's say you are bringing in artifacts. This could easily apply to your speech. And you're going to show them. Rather than just holding each one up on your own, you could call on volunteers. Charlie, can you please come up here and hold this? Maddie, can you hold this? And get your audience involved. If all they do is sit, they're gonna do that.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry. It was like we planned it, okay? They're gonna get bored, they're gonna yawn, or has this ever happened to you? You're actually super interested. You really want to listen, but your body's shutting down on you. Your body's not cooperating. You're like, it's not even boring. It's just, I don't know what's happening to me. I'm like, wow. I went to Hamilton a couple weeks ago. I've been looking so forward to it. But it was on a Saturday night. I'd had a crazy week. I'd been up all day, like since 5 a.m. going steady. The night before I hosted a huge party at my house. It was insane. And I was so tired. And we get to Hamilton and the seats are comfortable and the lights went down and it was dark. And in the middle, like the beginning of a Broadway play that I've wanted to go to forever, I started feeling so drowsy. I was like, wake up! Because my body just didn't want to cooperate, even though I was so excited to be there and listen. So whatever you can do to combat that with your audience, you want to, okay? You want your, and read the audience. If you're watching and you're talking and you're noticing that somebody's zoning off or dazed or looking drowsy, invite them to be your volunteer, okay? Because you're losing them. You're seeing that they're kind of like, so you might want to even move your body back into proximity. Because I noticed that this audience member of mine is drowsy, even if she doesn't want to be. Thus the yawn. So now I've just put myself right within proximity. And even if she's still tired, just me being right here makes you wake up. Okay? Think about how you can engage your audience. All right. Take a look at this. According to a Prezi study, half of the respondents said that they did something other than listen to a coworker's presentation, including sending texts, checking emails, or falling asleep. And this was not kids in the research. This was adults. And guess what? I sit in staff meetings twice a month, and this is true. Poor Mr. McFarland is up there giving it his best. And I can't tell you, okay, I'm just gonna tattle. I can't tell you how many teachers who probably yell at you for your phones are like this under the desk. I'm not joking. I'm watching them.
Who was it?
I won't name names.
Is it Miss Slade?
Nod if it was Du Bois. Just blink once if it was Du Bois. Blink once if it was Du Bois. Blink once if it was Du Bois.
If it's Du Bois, I'm
Oh, she
done.
blinked once. She blinked once.
You guys.
I'm
I'm serious.
I'm taking
They're
it serious.
sneaking their phones under the table when
Dude, I bet you it's
McFarland
Miss
is
Slade.
talking.
I bet you. She's
Or they are bringing their computers and they pretend they're taking notes on what McFarland is doing, but they're answering emails or
Yeah.
correcting papers.
Oh.
Yeah.
Dude, you guys are just like us. You're just as bad as us. Don't even.
And
You
I
can't
gotta
even
tell
get
you,
mad at us.
this is embarrassing, but I will tell you. One of the cons that we do in school that I care a lot about is the Veterans Day con. It means a lot to me that we have people who will serve our country even though they are putting their life on the line. And so when Veterans Day rolls around every year, I really care about it and I want to honor them. And at my old school at Chase, one of my favorite colleagues, he's a social studies teacher named Mr. Perea. He served in the military for a long time prior to becoming a teacher. And he's a dear, dear friend of mine. And he's in charge of the Veterans Day Con, and he speaks at it, and it's so interesting. I bring my whole class down. The whole student body is there. And at Chase, everybody had to kind of like sit on the floor in the gym for the con. We didn't have big bleachers. We just had a few. And so I had all my kids on the floor, and I'm sitting in a chair kind of next to them. And I don't know what happened. My body betrayed me. Mr. Perea's talking, the whole student body, it's an assembly I care about, and somehow, some way, because I didn't take care of myself and get enough sleep the night before,
Oh no.
I dozed out. I
You
straight dozed out, chin on my, like that. and a kid, one of my students next to me, like hit my leg, like, Retta, you're sleeping. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so humiliated. I can't, what a bad example for my students. To, I hope Haria didn't see me because that's rude and hurtful and he's actually a dear friend. And I just sent a message to my bosses that I'm not professional, that I'm worse than the kids, and that I don't give a rip about Veterans Day. I'm just telling you, all I could think to myself, I can't blame anybody for that except myself, but as a speaker, do what you can to help your audience out. If you notice somebody who's struggling, do something. Sometimes I'll even say, all right, in the middle of the speech, if you believe in supporting our veterans, let's give them a huge round of applause. And that will wake a few kids up. Do something to read your audience, okay? We've all been here, but as a speaker, the best speakers help the audience out. Okay, so really quickly in your notes, you're just gonna jot down some of your observations. First off, we've discussed it at length, but I want you to jot down, what are the demographics of your particular audience that you wanna remember when you're writing and preparing your speech? And then if you have any thoughts about something you might do to get the audience going and to interact with them and to keep them engaged, jot it down right now. I'm only gonna give you about 60 seconds to get these two things. These are just you starting the brainstorming process. Once you've got that down, draw a line and write in big letters, element number 3, component number 3, research. How do you begin to actually get the research so you can write your speech?
This is going along with like the inviting your audience.
Yeah.
Engaging your audience, that was what I was looking for. At the MLK con, the one guy who was talking.
Yes.
He was his raising his voice supposed to be the engaging?
It was. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. He created different volumes. Actually, you can even drop your voice.
Yeah.
Sometimes if people are getting kind of disinterested and they're just getting used to this sound of your voice, you suddenly slow it all down and bring it real quiet. Everyone keys in. And then you can hit, no, I'm just kidding. Whatever. But do you see? You can raise it, you can lower it. That volume can be a real engaging tool. Great observation, Amelia. All right, let's talk about research. The very first thing, and this was mentioned, I believe, when we watched the speech at the very beginning, you want to be an expert. Now, maybe you already are an expert in the field, but if you aren't, or even if you are, continue to develop your expertise. Whatever you can do in the next week to become the most knowledgeable about your topic is what you need to do. Are you gonna literally write notes on every single thing you research?
No.
I wouldn't. But would I be Googling and reading everything I can about it? Yes. I wanna be prepared. I wanna look for you, Levi, you're gonna be discussing an organization. You wanna be such an expert on it that you literally could represent them. You could be a spokesman for them, okay? You want to come across as if you are a full expert in the field.
My mom is.
Which, for you, I would also say one of the things you probably should do is do a full interview of your mom. Because
interrogation this weekend, she's talking to some people about using it. So she does that regularly. She's a spokesman for them.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Whatever you can do to become an expert. Even if you don't end up using every ounce of what you researched and what you got into your brain, just the fact that you've got it in you you're gonna come up with more confidence, okay? I will mention too, there is a time for questions. And you don't want to give a speech and then begin fielding questions and your answer to a bunch of the questions is, I don't know. You want to be prepped to be able to answer. Even when I'm prepping for a speech, I think, what things might they ask me? Because I want to make sure, even if I don't cover it in my speech, I want to be able to answer it when they ask.
Are the questions part of your time?
They are not. Yeah. We won't chew up your time with people's questions, and I actually limited. I only allow about 3 or 4. Otherwise, we could go on all day. Okay. Work with other. This is interesting that you just brought your mom up because this is really goes along with number 2. Work with other people to boost your credibility. So you try to think of somebody who's better at this than you, who knows more about this than you, who's more experienced in this than you, and set up a time with them. Find somebody. So right now, get your topic in your mind. Can you think of somebody? Could be somebody you know. It might be somebody you have to actually contact that you don't know. And part of your research should be an interview or a couple hours with that person. It could be a Zoom meeting, it could be a phone call. Sit with somebody who's a better expert at this than you are. Yes.
So for my topic, like, it's kind of hard because the people who have experienced it usually have a hard time talking about it.
Yeah.
So
for you, who I would set up something with is Big Ed.
Okay.
What?
I would. Now, there is something tricky. I happen to know he's leaving town on Tuesday. He was up here talking to me, and he's got some family stuff. But if you could grab him, for even a half an hour and interview him and get his thoughts. What does he do? He does school security. He knows things that you're not going to know. Okay? And hopefully it's not going to be extreme trauma talking because he's on the other side of it. Yeah.
So my topic is police brutality, as you know.
Yes.
And I used to go to this center. It's called the MLK Center.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Every single
I know Frida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know Frida?
I know Frida. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And they have like the summer program. It's called like PAL or something like that.
Yep.
And we would be around police officers all the time, so it was kind of.
That would be great. But you don't want to count on stuff from the past. You want to get current. Okay. You want to get right into something right now. Do you know any police officers that you could interview or a victim of police brutality?
Emily's dad is a police officer.
Yep, that would be one.
My father's also a police officer.
If you get stuck, let me know. My brother-in-law is also a cop.
Okay.
Whoever you can get, try to make it current. Yes.
So, as you know, my topic is autism.
Yeah.
And my uncle, he works at a bakery.
Okay.
Specifically for like disabled persons.
Yeah.
And his boss is named Dana, and she works with disabled people all day long. So I think she'd be a really good person to ask.
Nailed it. That's perfect.
I was thinking for mine, I was thinking maybe school therapist would be a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. I would see if you
School is
could
a
get.
therapist?
We have.
We
Yeah.
have many.
Yeah, it's counselors.
Yeah. I actually think Miss Shepherd has some
That's
training in it.
Who I was gonna go to,
Mhm.
because
See-
she has a lot of experience.
See if you could carve out even 20 minutes with her.
Oh, easy.
Yeah, perfect. When you give your speech, reference your interviews. It builds your credibility. Okay? If I were remember one of the things that I said was anaphylactic allergies?
Mm-hmm.
If I was giving a speech on that, I would go to my cousin who just graduated from med school, and I would interview her and get that angle. And then when I gave my speech, I would say, according to Dr. So-and-so, and I would say, I have a cousin who's a medical doctor, and this is her experience. And I would, because all of a sudden, now my credibility just got boosted because I know somebody who's even better in this field than I am. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Let's look at the next one. Okay, references. So that person that you go and interview and spend time with is one of your references. but you want to have more, okay? You wanna be very thorough, multiple sources, and then when you're giving your speech, always, always, always give credit where credit is due. If you researched it and it's a written source, say where you got it. Don't just add a bibliography at the end. Write in your speech, say, according to such and such. Okay? Or when I spoke to so-and-so. Now, like Levi, you wouldn't say, when I talked to my mom. Okay? You would literally say, when I spoke to Julie Theory, an expert in the field due to such and such. So if you are using a relation, don't put them in the context. Like I wouldn't say, when I talked to my cousin who's in med school or just graduated, I would say Dr. MacArthur. Does that make sense to everybody? Why is it important to not use the relation?
Because then it would like not increase your credibility.
That's,
Make
yeah,
it
It could
unprofessional.
probably
It's-
even bring
It's
it
too
down.
personal.
exactly.
Like if I was talking to a teacher, would I use Mrs., Miss, Mr.?
Uh-huh,
Okay,
yeah.
cause I don't know if you'd want full name or not.
I would put the full name if you wanted to, okay? And then I would say what makes them an expert. So, like if you use Mrs. Shepherd, I might say more than a therapist at Salk Middle School.
Use her experience.
That's exactly right, her clinical experience, and even maybe tout her education.
For Big Ed, would you want me to actually use like Big Ed or his like full name?
According to Ed Richardson,
Wait, that's his name?
yeah,
Is that
It
Edward?
says Mr. Richardson on his.
it may be Edward, but he does go by Ed. According to Ed Richardson, a police officer in the Spokane Police Force for X amount of years, see that? Who's also served in public schools as a resource officer for X amount of years. That's how we would do it. Yeah, we wouldn't want to say Big Ed. Okay. A minimum of 3 sources, and I really mean a minimum.
3 like in-person sources?
No, you also can just do like what you've researched online and so on. All right, research I got through pretty quickly. We're moving on to organize.
That was good.
Draw your line, and let's start talking about how to organize this speech. So once you've gathered all your research, you're to the point where you gotta start writing the thing. But how do you write a speech? I will tell you this, you're gonna see some similarities in speech writing as you would see in an essay. There's some definite overlaps. You're gonna see some similarities, but it's not exactly the same, okay? The very first thing you need to do is you need to choose a pattern of organization. Different speeches are gonna lend themselves to different types of organization. A topical organizational pattern means that you are doing probably informational. So I'm gonna use this one, I don't think anybody's using this one. It was one of our options and I had a kid do it before, and I brought it up, the skin cancer one. Remember me saying that?
Autism. That's
Um,
topical, right?
That may be topical, she may go that route, she gets to choose. But let's say I'm doing skin cancer and I wanna use the topical organizational pattern. Probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all the different types of skin cancer. And one of my topics will be types. I'm gonna look at the causes of skin cancer. One of my topics will be causes. I'm gonna look at all the symptoms of skin cancer. One of my topics will be symptoms. I'm gonna look at all the treatments, and one of my topics will be treatments. Do you see how I'm taking the whole thing of skin cancer and I'm breaking it into smaller topics and I'm covering one topic at a time? Okay, so if you choose the topical organizational pattern, you're looking at big categories that fall within your speech and you're organizing everything under those categories. The reason topical works and is nice is because sometimes people will just get up and they'll just start rattling off everything they know about a topic, but it's not organized. If I'm hearing about skin cancer and you tell me a little bit about like the symptoms and then you bounce over here and you say you get treated like this and then you come over and you're saying, but a few other symptoms are this, and it's caused by that, how many of you notice you're not setting your audience up to remember anything? You're presenting the material like a little ping pong ball. Boom, you're over here. Whoa, you're over here, over here, over here. And it just doesn't stick. Put them in the nice topics, the categories.
Are we gonna have like our speech or at least some things like written on paper that we can reference, like so that, you know, if we're quoting someone, we have
Absolutely.
that.
I'll talk to you about what you do there because there's some options. Okay. Not all speeches lend themselves to topical organization. Chronological, which means by date, is another really good way to organize a certain speech. So if I'm giving a speech on, I actually just told Mr. Malm about this. I had a kid a couple years ago. He was just here the other day with Shadow's football team. And he did a speech on the metamorphosis of rap music. And he took us through when rap music first hit the scene and then how it changed over the course of all the decades. So we got to look at the origin of rap music in like the 50s. He actually brought it back to the 30s. Believe it or not, there's some origins clear back in the jazz days of the 30s. And he walked us through, and like when we got to the 70s, that's when it really kind of hit mainstream. And then 80s is when it blew up. Rap had never blown up till the 80s. And then it switched and it looked different in the 90s. And he brought us all the way up to current, and it changed. How many of you can see how chronological is exactly how you should go with a speech like that? Okay? It worked really well. I've had some kids do things like World War II. Chronological works for that as well. Okay? That's the pattern that you'd want to go.
So something I was debating on doing is the way that like the ideal body changed throughout history, but it's not going to be the whole portion of the essay.
So there may be a little section where you default towards chronological, but it's not your overarching organizational pattern.
Is there a way to do like more than one? Because I feel like thinking about how I would write mine and stuff, like there's parts of it where I can think chronological works very well, but then other parts of it where I feel like it wouldn't.
So kind of what I was just saying to Amelia, if there's a subset where you have to do like the chronological, but that's not your overarching, that should be fine. What I don't want you to do though is look uncertain and bounce around to this, that, everything, okay? If you get a little bit more close to this and you're still stuck, I can help you, okay? Spatial, is this a question, Levi?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just curious what mine would even be. I don't know.
Let's get through all of them and then we'll see, okay? Spatial. Spatial is if you are doing some kind of a speech on things that have to do with areas. So let's say that you're talking about poverty across America. You may do something that's spatial. You might show poverty in a certain continent and then move to another continent and then move to another continent and then move to another continent. You may do spatial. There's a chance you would, okay? If you're doing indigenous animals of the South, you might have a map as literally the guide, the spatial organization of your entire speech, okay? Spatial doesn't work for everything, but it does lend itself to some. Cause effect, okay? Cause effect, so remember I brought up the skin cancer one? I could also go down this path for skin cancer. I could just talk about the causes and then the effects on a person's life. Cause effect is also a really powerful organizational pattern. And then problem solution. If you're doing a known problem, something that has been a problem in America for a long time, and then you're proposing a solution, then you're gonna hit problem solution. Now, here's where kind of what Amelia and Maddie were asking, and I think that this is, you can't totally avoid it. So if I'm doing problem solution, how many of you could see that I might also have a little bit of topical in there? Because I might have topics under the problem, and I might have topics under the solution. Do you see what I'm saying?
No.
So sometimes we do kind of combine two, okay? Now for Levi, yours, I think you have to determine what your purpose is. Entertain, persuade, or inform. And once you've figured out that, it's gonna help you figure out this. Does that make sense?
Make sure it's feeling connected.
Charlie?
What should I do for mine?
To me, yours screams problem solution
Yeah.
or cause effect.
It'd probably be cause effect. She's doing,
Yeah,
what,
that sounds-
drinking?
The effects of drinking in pregnancy. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming you're gonna talk about fetal alcohol syndrome and maybe some other things like that.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think cause effect might be the route you would go. Amberly?
So, mine doesn't really seem to fit in any sort of category because my topic, like my main message is basically autistic people aren't that different from us. And
I think topical.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
Yes.
want to do cause and effect for mine, but there's like no completely well-known cause for even bipolar. So I don't know how that would.
Yeah. Say the proposed causes and that it, at this time, it is undetermined. We have not been able to have a definitive answer medically.
Oh, what did you
Maddie?
like talk
So for mine, would it like kind of be possible for it to be a problem solution and chronological? Because in mine, like
Both
a
are
way-
possible, it
'cause
just
it-
depends on which route you wanna go. Do you wanna go down the history of school shootings and how they've escalated? Or do you wanna talk about the problem and then potential ways to solve the problem?
that I could prove the problem with how many shootings there's been.
Yeah, so don't think so narrow. I don't want these organizational patterns to put you in a box. They're only meant to give you a framework.
I don't think anyone does it.
Okay, so when I was thinking originally that I do kind of a mix of chronological and cause effect, but then I don't want to leave it as just, because then you're just kind of leaving it as a problem. So will I kind of have to mash three?
I think that you are going to hate my answer.
Not fun.
I think that you have such a big topic and such a lofty view of everything you want these people to know.
I have to narrow it.
You do.
No, that's horrible.
I know, honey. I know. Because I'm envisioning where you want to go with this and merging all three, and it would be a 30-minute speech. So
What is yours?
she's got a great one. Yeah, she's doing standards of beauty in women
Oh,
and
yeah.
how that's, yeah, so you're gonna have to narrow it.
Is
All right.
that just cause and effect? Or problem?
All right, so here's where you're starting to see some similarities. You are gonna have an introduction. For sure. Okay, that's where it's kind of like an essay. Your introduction, I'm gonna tell you right now, starts the minute you leave your chair. So when I call on your name and it's your turn to get up and give the speech, the minute you leave the chair, all eyes are on you. So how you approach the stage is even part of your introduction. Approach the stage with confidence. And the minute you get up here, you address your audience in a greeting. Generally speaking, the greeting sounds something like this. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being present here. I'm very excited to share this topic with you today. So however you choose to do your greeting, you should have some type of a greeting, okay? That's how you open up your speech and walk up with confidence. It's not gonna be like you come up here, you stand all nervous, you look at me at the back because you know I'm grading you, and you wait for me to say, go ahead. It's not gonna look like that. The minute I say your name, you're in charge, you're in command of the entire audience. Start with a greeting. As soon as you've done the greeting, move into your introduction of yourself and your topic and your purpose. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for an opportunity to share with you today. My name is Michelle Areta, and I have the privilege of sharing with you about the topic of anaphylactic shock. I hope to inform you about this topic so that if you ever encounter somebody who suffers from this, you'll know exactly what it is and how to treat it. See how I just laid it all out there? So that's what the beginning of your speech looks like. This will only take probably 15 seconds. But it's in a very important 15 seconds. Very important 15 seconds. And then you get into your attention getting device. After you've done your initial greeting and introduction, you need to have something dynamic planned to grab their attention. You only have 30 seconds to make a first impression. So your greeting, your introducing of yourself, and your opening, your attention getting device are super important. So here are some ideas. You could say an intriguing question that requires a response from the audience. Now, obviously you're not gonna be calling on people who raise their hand because that's gonna chew into your time. But let's say that your question is, I don't wanna use any of your guys's because I don't wanna take up an idea that might be already used.
Skin cancer.
Fish.
I'll just stick with skin cancer, okay? I could say this. Follow along with me, audience. Raise your hand if you imagine yourself a beautiful day at the lake, enjoying the sun, diving off the diving board. Raise your hand if this is something you've done or would like to do in the next few months. Excellent. Now, if you have been very careful every single time you've gone out to the lake on the dock to put on what's it called? Sunscreen. Please stand to your feet.
And not every time.
I got natural sunscreen.
And then I might move into my startling statistic. Thank you so much. I noted that only 1/3 of the class is diligent about the use of sunscreen. In a room this size with 20 kids, I think it's important for you to know that 50% of you, that means 1 in every 2, Eros, Matthew, Charlie, Levi, Carissa, and Michael, if you continue to choose not to use sunscreen, you may all run a high risk of developing skin cancer by the time you're 30.
Is it?
Do you see how I immediately brought you in?
Are you being serious right now? Is that true?
I just made it up.
No, it is true though. It's a problem. I avoid too many moles and all that. Like, I need some sunscreen, bro.
I don't know the actual
Will I die of skin
stats.
cancer?
Black people can get sunburns.
What?
Yes.
I got like 1 sunburn on my nose my whole life.
Now, you are lucky you have enough melanin that's gonna protect you a lot more than, say, somebody super fair like Levi. So your risk is far less than his, but don't ever make the mistake of thinking you're completely in the clear. You
Did I
probably
get
don't.
sunburns?
You could get away with limited hours without sunscreen or a really low SPF. But yeah. That was a side note. So did you guys notice how I immediately grabbed people's attention?
Yeah,
Scared
that
for
got
my
my
life
attention.
Okay. Another thing I've seen done with the startling statistic. This one's kind of graphic, but it did grab my attention. This was, and I think we had both sides. We had we had the abortion issue as people's topics, both for and against. I had a kid who did against and came in with a jar of kidney beans.
Oh no.
And there were about, 300 kidney beans in this mason jar. And out of nowhere, the kid just opened it and went and chucked all the beans out. And of course, what does everybody do? They look. And he said, each of these represents a life that was lost in America in the last 10 seconds.
Whoa.
Are you starting to see how you can grab
Did you have
people's
to clean
attention?
those up? Because
He clearly did, but part of his method was to leave it on the ground because he wanted to grab attention, and it worked.
Did they ask you about if they could do that?
No, and you don't have to ask me.
Oh.
Oh,
Okay?
And I just
So
feel
what
like,
if I brought alive
Yeah.
something into the
Don't do anything that will get us both in trouble.
That's
bring a
crazy.
raccoon in here.
Eyes on
That's
me.
smart. Was that this school or Chase?
That was a chase.
Dude, kids at Chase were crazy.
I want you to think outside the box. You want to be dynamic. You want something very creative that will grab the audience's attention right away, okay? A quote from somebody that is an expert or noteworthy also could help. I'll share this one. This was very powerful. I had a student who did one on drunk driving, and their opening was an audio clip of a 911 call placed by her brother, who was hit by a drunk driver and called 911 himself. She was able to get the audio clip, and she played it for us, and her brother passed away. And it opened with that audio clip. And I will tell you, I believe everybody who sat in that speech, there's a very good chance they never drank and drove, because you couldn't sit through that and not be impacted. Like, in the first 60 seconds, it was more than just a speech. It was a life-changing moment for all of us. I want you to be thinking, what can I do to grab my audience's attention? I would like this to be more than just a grade. I would like this to be powerful, okay? Now, you may be thinking, well, my topic's not that intense. You know, Matthew's probably going, not sure how I'm gonna get all that with baseball, but you could come
Or
up with
baseball,
something
maybe.
powerful, okay? Think about ways that you can engage your audience automatically, okay? Too bad we're in a classroom. He could set off a firework. That would grab our attention.
Starts a fire.
Yes.
I'm assuming we're not allowed to like use like certain pictures or anything that are too like graphic or
I'm gonna get to visuals soon, and there are some parameters I wanna talk about when we get to that. Okay, now I wanna talk about how you end your talk. So just as important as how you start your talk
I have an idea.
is how you're going to end your talk. You do want to provide a brief summary of your main points and your message. And you would even say some kind of thing. As I close my time here with you today, I want you to remember that A, blah, 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 blah. B, da, 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 da. C, yada, yada, yada. And that my message to you that I hope you walk away with is blah, blah, blah. Okay? And then if you can, try to have some ending that even though your speech is over, the whole audience is still thinking about it. Something that's going to hold our attention. I was also telling Mr. Malm about another speech up at Chase. It's right by the Morningstar Boys Ranch. And I don't know if you know what Morningstar Boys Ranch is. It is sort of a group home for young men who have had trouble with the law, trouble with their families, and they're no longer living at home. So they go to live on the Boys Ranch. And I love this kid. One of my favorite students lived at the Boys Ranch. I'm not going to get into his life. His life was a mess, and he had lots of criminal activity. And he no longer lived at home. He lived at the Boys Ranch. Well, and he's this big, tough, delinquent kid. But he ended up having a love for horses. Something he would have never imagined. And his closing clip was 2 side-by-side like pictures. One was of him in full gang attire with a gun in his hand. And the other was him riding a horse out in the middle of the pasture. And he said that his closing line was, this was the life I used to live, and I could never find freedom. And this is the life I'm starting to live, and every day I find freedom.
Whoa, I just got chills.
You got you.
How
being
many
a
of you,
horse rider, oh my gosh.
how many of you could see at this point the speech ended and we all kept thinking about it?
Yeah.
My cousin's at a ranch like that.
Yeah. So try to think of something that's going to keep, and this is just about horses, but it was also about his life. Okay? think I'm gonna hang tight. We got quite a lot done. Everybody who missed, hopefully they will find you and you can help them out. Good question.
When I told you my topic about police brutality, I was kind of thinking more something like police misconduct.